Thank you. Searching for sun, but you're praying for rain. Looking for love, but you push it away. Like a time bomb under the surface. Throw it away.
Hello, Real Life. How are we doing out there? Welcome to Real Life. My name is Christian. I am one of the pastors here. I'm so excited for all of those who are watching with us, whether you're here, whether you're at home, wherever you're watching. We're so glad. I'm excited to kick off with us, and I'm excited for just what God's going to do. And so I just wanted to start off like I do every time before we get into Home Wreckers Week 3. I wanted to start off with a verse. And so this is always an invitation to me before we dig in for what God's going to do and what God's going to kind of reveal to us. And so here is Matthew 11:18. It says, "Then Jesus said, 'Come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is light.'" Before we get into our series tonight, I just want to encourage you that regardless of where you are at, what is going on, what kind of week you had, it talks about how we're to bring our burdens to Him, that we can find rest in Him. And you guys have all kinds of plans coming up in the weekend or whatever you have going on. And regardless of that, Jesus asks us to come to Him, to learn from Him. And one of the ways we do that is by learning from the Word of God, that we learn from what He proclaims in His scriptures and through His people. And we are people that He has died for, that He has died for the church. There's something powerful that happens when the people that He died for gather in His name and sing and praise and realize that He's with us. He's not some far off, distant God. He is with us. It says when two or more gather, He is there. And so tonight I want to encourage you to engage with us. I want to encourage you to come and be involved and see what He can do. And so we're in a series, Week 3 is this week, and kind of where we've been is Week 1, we talked about how home wreckers in our lives and in our relationships, not just in our marriages, not just in, with our kids, but in all of our relationships, selfishness and pride can come into those and be home wreckers. All of us have a home. All of us have relationships. All of us are involved in people's lives. And selfishness and pride can be involved and wreck those things. Those are home wreckers. Last week, we talked about bad communication and expectations. That through bad expectations and communication, that can be home wreckers in our lives and in our relationships. This week, we're talking about priorities and goals. The wrong priorities and goals can be home wreckers in our relationships. And I've really just been convicted through this series as God created us to be in relationship, and how there are things in our relationships that can be not helpful but destructive. But in that, not to go, man, this just is all bad, but what God can do in and through us as we seek throughout this series. And so I'm excited. Before we dig in, I wanted to read the definition of priority and of a goal. And so a priority is a thing that is regarded as more important than another. The fact or condition of being regarded or treated as more important. A goal is an idea of the future or desired result that a person or a group of people envision, plan, and commit to achieve. You know, it's always around January or the beginning of the year where it's like priorities and goals and resolutions come out. And I'm never the one on that bandwagon, right? It's like, okay, a bunch of new people are in the gym and they're there for a week, right? And then it's back to normal. But this has been one of the sermons that I've preached in a while or planned for in a while that has been super convicting to me. Super convicting, and it talks actually a lot about it. There's a couple verses I want to read as we dig into this. This is what 1 Timothy 4:8 says. It says, "Physical training is good, But training for godliness is much better, promising benefits in this life and the life to come. This is a trustworthy saying, and everyone should accept it. This is why we work so hard and continue to struggle, for our hope is in the living God, who is the Savior of all people, in particular of all believers. He's talking here about people who train physically, that their priority, that their goal, and that can be beneficial. But that we train, we struggle, we go through things because of our priorities and goals, and what are the right ones within those. The next one I love is in 1 Corinthians. It says, "Don't you realize that in a race everyone runs, but only one person gets the prize? So run to win. All the athletes are disciplined in their training. They do it to win a prize that will fade away, but we do it for an eternal prize. So I run with purpose in every step. I am not just shadow boxing. I discipline my body like an athlete, training it to do what it should. Otherwise, I fear that after preaching to others, I myself might be disqualified." And so for us, as we look at our priorities and goals, as we come to the table tonight to look at our lives, to look at our relationships, to look at the things that are supposed to be the most important, right? Goals and priorities. What's the most important thing? And so that's what we're digging into, and how those things can affect our relationships, what we pursue, what we put our energy into. You know, when I was a wrestler growing up, you could tell real quick who were the ones that actually took wrestling and had it as a priority, right? I used to cut weight, and you'd see the people on the bus eating Snickers, and you're like, dude, I know you're going to miss weight. And I'm in the back, like, spitting in cans and, like, you know, barely making it. I had it as a priority. Like, it was important to me, right? And then I would run to do that, and it was something I really cared about. I wanted to be a state champion, so I would wrestle and go to tournaments and travel and all these things. And you could tell the people who were taking it serious, not just by like, yeah, I love wrestling. Anyone could say that, but then you'd look at their actions, right? I loved wrestling. And priorities and goals in your life aren't just what you say, but it's how you live them out that you can tell. And those are revealed by several different things. By your energy, how much energy you put towards it, how much resources you put towards it, how much time, how much passion. You can really tell when someone's talking about something and you're like, they do not care about what they're talking about. Or when someone comes alive, when they communicate it and they're excited about it. It doesn't mean it's always fun. Wrestling wasn't always fun, but I was passionate about it. It is revealed what you really think and what your real priorities are by those things, and we're going to talk about that. And so first I want to talk about the wrong priorities and goals. The wrong priorities and goals that we can have that can affect us and in our relationships and what we pursue and how that affects our hearts and our lives. There's several different things that the world chases after that we can fall into. And some of them I'm going to list off. It's not all of them, but there's a general amount of different things that people can make priority. And not all of them are bad. One of these by themselves isn't bad. But when you make any of these the most important thing in your life that you chase after, then it affects your life and your relationships with God and with others. The first one I put is money, right? When people go, I'm going to make money, that is a priority and a goal. And remember, priority being more important than everything else. Money in itself is not wrong to pursue, and how you go about that and being generous and all those things. But when it is the number one priority and you pursue after that, you can even find ways to justify it, right? Like, I'm going to go after all this money so that me and my kids can go and do a lot of stuff together. But the problem is in that process, I'm never seeing them. They miss me. I'm not showing up and leading well. But the intent is at some point I'll get to spend time. And the priority can be money, and you can even justify it to where you're going, I'm going to do it right eventually, and I'm going to pursue these things. We can find ways to justify. You don't have to be in the world and like money's your God in every way. Even in the church, we can find ways to justify. Money in itself is not wrong to have it, to pursue it, to be generous with it, to honor God with it. But money as a priority can seep in to our lives and affect every relationship. Success, right? Going out and having the most success, being super successful in my job. People looking at me, and in a way you can even justify that is, man, if I were to just be super successful, I would be influential. And I would meet people, and then I could use that influence to impact others for the kingdom. Even in the Christian world, we can do that. And that in itself is not bad. That is really good. Yes, use your influence. But if in that process, whether it's your friends, your connection to church, your connection to the Lord, your connection to people in your life, if you're willing to not prioritize them in order to gain some potential influence that at some point in time you'll be able to use, then we can miss it. Success, money, could be power. You want to, and that could be along the same lines. I want to be powerful. I want to have influence. That can look similar. Or this one's not bad either. Any one of these isn't bad, but how it is in our hearts is important. To chase my dreams, to chase my hobbies, right? I'm going to go out and have the best trips and adventures, and I'm going to go out and make memories and travel. None of those things are necessarily bad in themselves, but what am I doing with my time and resources? What am I doing with the relationships and what God cares about in the process? I'm not saying don't go on vacations. I love vacations. You guys ever have any good vacations in your life? I've had some amazing ones, and those aren't bad. Making dreams aren't bad. But when they start to impact all the areas of my life, because those are the number one thing, then it affects things. Going out and seeking pleasure, right? Whether it's partying or whether it's, doing things for your pleasure, whether it's whatever, those things are not the things that fulfill us. Those are not the things that fulfill us. It could even be sports, and maybe not even for you, but for your kids. I wrestled, so I love that my kids are in wrestling. And we can go, man, I really want our kids to be super involved so that they grow up and, through sports or education, that they can get into a good college. And then they do well, and they're not tempted to get involved in things that they shouldn't, right? And the heart of that is good. But you know what? I'm gonna spend every resource so that they travel all over the place. I'm going to make sure that they're at everything, but at the same time, I'm not going to push them to get into relationships with other godly people. I'm not going to push them to get into youth groups. I'm not going to push them to have people who are going to ask the hard questions, because I'm so busy with our resources doing all these different things. And that in itself, I go to stuff with my kids, tournaments. I do the practices. I do those different things. But what is more important? We can get sucked into these things in our lives that then affect the people and relationships around us. Whether that's being comfortable in our appearance, whatever, all these different, there's a bunch that I could talk about. And these things, I'm not saying you can't enjoy. God has given us things to enjoy in life and to be fulfilled in life and to go, man, God, thank you for what you've blessed me with. I like buying nice clothes or trying to have vehicles that, run at least, right? And have, those things are not bad to have. But before you know it, we can get sucked into it. And then even in your closest relationships, whether it's marriage or whatever, you're fighting over things. There's this analogy that I love that I've seen before, and I wanted to use it. I have this rope over here, and I want this to represent something for you guys. So imagine the beginning of the rope is your start of existence, right? And according to Scripture, I know it ends over there, but picture this rope going on forever and ever and ever for eternity, right? So your start and then eternity. Scripture reveals somewhere we're either going to be in heaven or hell for eternity, right? And if we were to look at eternity and then the scope of our 80 years here, I'm choosing to go, okay, this represents our time on earth, our short time on earth. It's not very long. And then there's eternity somewhere else. And your priorities and how we live our life are shown whether you're thinking of this other part or just here. Whether we're keeping this in mind, or if everything we do, all of our effort, all of our desire, our passion, all of our resources, all of the things we care about, you can tell really quick if it's just all about here or with this in mind. And we can forget and get so sucked into this in our priorities and goals. And we can forget that because of Jesus, now all of this can be spent with him. All of this sin paid for. And then yet we can still get so sucked into this and think that this is all there is. That everything we do should be involved right in this. And our priorities can get mixed up and we can pursue the things in ways we shouldn't and get so into this, can't we? When God's going, what's all this? Jesus is going to be with us for all of this forever and ever and ever with him in eternity. Eternity in perfect grace and mercy and justification, no more sin, no more pain and suffering, but yet this thing can be so important and we can get so engaged in this is all there is. And I'm gonna, in the analogy that I've seen, I'm gonna save so I can enjoy this little bit right here, right? Where are our priorities? Where are our priorities? This is what it says in 1 John. It says, don't love this world nor the things it offers you. For when you love the world, you do not have the love of the Father in you. For the world offers only a craving for physical pleasure, a craving for everything we see, and a pride in our achievements and possessions. These are not from the Father, but are from this world. And this world is fading away along with everything that people crave. But anyone who does what pleases God will live forever. He's not saying we can't enjoy like pizza. I love pizza, guys. He's not saying don't enjoy food. He's not saying don't enjoy pasta or sunsets. It says that we're to be fully thankful for the things that God has given us. But it is saying, what are we fully caring about? What are we entrenching our lives in? What are we spending our time doing? I was so convicted after finishing writing this that I literally just stood there for an hour in just like silence, like, man. Because even in the good things that we do, we can get in with the wrong motives. And I can spend so much time worrying about things that don't even matter. I can spend time fighting with people over things that literally do not matter. I can stay frustrated and isolated, caring about things that don't matter. Thinking about how it matters here, going, man, this really doesn't, in the grand scope of things, matter. I love sports. I'm a sports person, but I would way rather my kids know who Jesus is than spend my whole life with them caring about sports first, as much as sports was a part of my life. I want them to know Jesus. I want people to know who Jesus is. I want to be in love with Jesus and care about the things of Jesus. Which leads me to the next point. Let's talk about this then, God-revealed priorities. If we've talked about some of the wrong priorities, what are the God-revealed priorities? Because here's the cool thing, God has given us some direction. His word is accurate. It never comes back void. It says it is used to teach and correct. That through the power of the gospel, through the word, it is literally the power to salvation in our lives. And so God has some things to say about this. And here's what's really cool. We were God's number one priority in the midst of even our sin. The reason why I look at making God a priority is because he made me his priority. If you look at Jesus' life and what he spent his time on, his whole entire human life down here, fully God, fully man, was for me and you. Every ounce of energy thinking of us, doing everything right every time, all of his resources, and then dying on the cross for us. Pretty amazing. But Jesus one time was asked by some Pharisees who often tried to trick him, and Jesus is Jesus. You ain't tricking Jesus. And he summed up a question because he was asked, what's the most important thing in the Bible, basically? What's the most important commandment? And back in their day, they lived every bit of their life around the 10 Commandments. Like, what's the most important? Talk about priorities. These guys were religious to the T, right? They just didn't get that they couldn't do it in themselves. They needed a Jesus. But they were very religious. Talk about priorities. They would just go through these things. They were rigorous in it. And he was asked this question, and this is what it says. You guys know this. Matthew 22, it says, Jesus replied, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. A second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. The entire law and the demands of the prophets are based on these two commandments." You know, I don't know if we've fully wrapped our head around what it looks like to love God with our hearts, minds, and souls. Like every bit of who we are. If you want a glimpse of it, look at how Jesus loved us and what he did for us. That's a glimpse of how we're to love him. And we fall short of that. I fall short of that. But he's saying, hey, you want me to summarize the entire Bible for you? You want me to tell you what should be the number one priority? The number one goal is being in love with the Father because he's in love with you. Modeling your life after him because of what he's done for you. Love him with your heart, mind, and soul. And love others as yourself. To be in love with people. And then the rest of the Bible, because we're broken and sinful, is about all kinds of ways in which that's hard for us and how we need to learn to do that because we're jacked up. And so God has to use his word to go, this is how it looks. This is what brings you meaning. This is what brings you purpose. That doesn't mean that it's easy. That doesn't mean that it's always going to feel good, but this is the source of comfort and this is the source of meaning. He's going, this is what it is. This is the greatest. And it talks about how we're to abide in the Lord and in his love for us. We're to know the kind of love that Jesus has shown us when we believe in him, remain in him, follow him. It talks about it in John 15:4. It talks about how we're to be connected to his church, to be builders of his church. To be builders of the lost people. I don't know if you remember, whether you're a new believer or not, I remember being an addict and how lost I was, how dark it was, how shame-filled it was, how lonely it was, chasing after all the things that the world says should be priority, only to feel more empty in the process. That we're to be builders and bringers of light and hope, to serve and to speak the truth in love, and to be runners to the messes of the world. He's going, love people, build my church, my bride, build the one that I died for up, be a part of it, be connected to it, know each other within it, bear each other's burdens, to forgive and respect. And yeah, it's going to be hard, but love and forgive the way I've loved and forgiven you. That's the priority. That's the meaning. That's what is the thing that's going to give you confidence and hope and purpose. It says that we're not to just pretend that we love people. Sometimes when it gets really busy, I can pretend at times when you're tired. You can pretend, but he's saying don't just pretend. Really love people the way that I really love you. The way that I really love you. It talks about how we're to be ambassadors, and it talks about all kinds of different things. The Bible's full of it. You should read it. It's amazing. How we're to love and interact, and how these goals are the source and meaning of life. This so convicted me. And it talks about not just, we call it the 5 spheres, but really biblically, we don't do this part-time. We don't just show up to the church and we do it just there, or just do it at just work or at home. We're to do it with our family and our kids. We're to do it in our workplaces and in our homes and everywhere we go. We're to be lovers of people and the Lord. And I want to ask you, do a little exercise with you that I did with myself. If I were to ask you, what are the 3 most important things to you in life? What would you want the 3 most important things in your entire life? You could call those your highest priorities and goals. What would those be? I did it. I wrestled through it, and I was like, okay, I'm going to write these down. And I want you to be thinking what you would write. I want to read what I wrote. I wrote, knowing God and loving Him and trusting Him and walking in faith with Him because everything He's done for me. That was number 1. I also tried to do number of importance. Number 2, being a good husband and father, leading them well as Jesus follows. Number 3, building His church and reaching the lost, making disciples, being a lover of people, and impacting the world for Jesus. Those are what I would want to be my top 3 things. But what we want and what we do can be very different. Because I can say that all day long, but then if I don't actually take steps or do that, then it's just good ideas. And it so convicted me. And I want to ask you, with your top 3 things, if you've thought of them, if you were to take your calendar out, if I was to get a snapshot of your life, how you spend your time, what you spend your money on, what your effort and energy goes towards, what passion comes out of you, would those things align with how you spend and live your life? We can say all day long, God first, people first, church first, but then when we look at our lives, and I was so convicted by this because I'm a pastor, and even in ministry, I can get so out of whack with things. I can get home and I'm tired, and the temptation is like bedtime's coming around. Instead of sit there with my kids and pray and talk about Jesus, he's like, dude, put them to bed, Netflix, let's go, right? All of us can do it. I can get out of whack. Or even in the church sometimes, we can go through the motions and get lost in this, like I have to do this because I'm a Christian, instead of we get to do this because of Jesus. And I was so convicted by this. And I'm not talking about, if I was to do this tomorrow and go, sweet, I'm going to align my top 3 with the rest of my life. 1, I'm never going to do it perfect. But I'm not saying this to guilt you to go, now you're going to go out and get connected, and you're going to get into a life group, and you're going to serve and all these things. I'm not saying to guilt you. And I'm not saying like, sweet, I'll go do these things, and I don't want you to do them if it just becomes a checking the box. It's called religion, and Jesus actually spoke out against the Pharisees. It isn't about religion and the box checking of what we're supposed to do. I'm talking about a life truly transformed, a heart from darkness to light. I'm talking about a heart and life because of Jesus, that is filled with passion for the broken, because they realize that their sin is paid for. That what Jesus has done has changed everything. And so in a minute, the ushers are going to get ready to come forward as I have a couple more minutes, and they're going to start passing out communion. But here's a verse talking about box checking. This is 1 Corinthians 13. It says, if I could speak all the languages of earth and of angels, but didn't love others, I would only be a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I had the gift of prophecy, and if I could understand all of God's secret plans and possessed all knowledge, and if I had such faith that I could move mountains but didn't love others, I would be nothing. If I gave everything I have to the poor and even sacrificed my body, I could boast about it. But if I didn't love others, I would have gained nothing. Even in the church, he's not mentioning some low-level Christianity. Speaking in the tongues of angels, knowing prophecy, being burned at the stake, selling all that I have. These people are doing everything, but yet they've gained nothing because their hearts aren't completely understanding the love of God in others. The love of God in others. This convicted me, but not in a bad way, not like I'm a bad person, I'm shameful way. I was thinking about this and I'm going, man, God, what I spend my time worrying about and caring about means nothing a lot of the times. I want to care about what you care about. I want to love the way that you love me. And that only comes by first standing in this place where you see what God has done for you. And so as the ushers come and they start preparing, passing out communion, I want to talk about one more thing as they do that. The next point is when I fall short. Because here's the deal. We're going to fall short in this process. Even if I were to align all my priorities, I would fall short. We all fall short of the glory of God. But that's where we get to come to Jesus and not just be saved by grace. We're not just saved by grace. We live and are sustained by grace. It doesn't just happen at the point of realizing you need Jesus and then you better get your act together. We're not only saved by grace, we're sustained by it. And I want you to hear this verse in 2 Corinthians. It says, God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. You see, Jesus, it says, became our sin so that we could have his righteousness. If you want to really have God as your number one priority, you really want to, you're hearing me today, and you want to love people well, that doesn't come unless you sit back and go, I need Jesus. And look at what Jesus did. And believe in your heart the gospel. And it's through that belief of the gospel that your heart transforms. And we get off the road and we drift from it. And that's where we have to go, man, my priorities are all over the place. I got to come back to who Jesus is. I got to not focus on this red part and all the things the world and the red part tell me matter the most. And all the what ifs the red part tell me are going to, break loose and freak out. Because guess what? God's in control, not the red part. Not the red part. And so I don't know where you are today, but I want to ask you some questions. What are you hearing me say today? What's one thing that you want to take out of this? Are you walking in abidance with God? We can get so used to hearing that and adding that to the checklist. Like it's another task we got to check. I got to abide. That's not it. It's a life-changing relationship with an actual God of the universe who created everything. We would be lucky if we got to abide. And we get invited to. It's not a checklist to add in your list of to-dos. God invites you in relationship with him, in his word, with his people, connecting, serving. It's an amazing thing. Are you connected? Are you doing life with people, or are you alone and isolated? And finally, do you realize that we can talk about priorities today, your priorities, because God made you his number one priority? He left heaven. He spent all of his resources and time to give himself up to die on the cross for you. And so with that, we're going to prepare our hearts for communion and just spend some time with you and the Lord. Come before him. What step do you need to take? What prayer do you need to pray? Maybe you don't know what to do with it. Go, God, show me, direct me. He's here with us. He's in this room. Spend some time with him. Let's do that now.
Thank you for joining us online today. We will be continuing communion and finishing up service in just a moment. We pray today's service was challenging, encouraging, and motivational. We hope you'll visit one of our 3 campuses soon. We'd love to meet you in person and give you and your family a small gift of appreciation. For more information about Real Life, upcoming events, and connecting with our community, please visit reallifeministries.com. Come join us and help us impact our community, our nation, and the world for Jesus, one person at a time.